Whoops, did not mean to do that. I ended the intro early. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Rambling with Rodney podcast. I'm Fluffy2840, the guy who runs the YouTube channel or the Twitch channel, depending on where you are watching this from. And this is Rodney.
I am not Fluffy2840.
Yeah, we're it's like hosting a podcast for another person on another person's channel. It's very strange.
It is. He's stranger more than I am, though, if the truth be told.
50% of you came into me. That's what I've been saying recently, always. But welcome to another episode of the podcast. So here's the good news, because I know I mentioned this last week or 2 weeks ago or whenever that was, because I've lost count since we've been at the beach. We are done with the Rhett and Link series. We did Rhett twice and we got through Link in one, which is amazing. So if you guys were waiting for a Link 2, that is not going to happen, because we went over our notes and just felt like that we are good with Link and we said everything that needed to be said. So we have moved on to the new topic. One thing I do want to say that my dad kind of brought up without meaning to bring this up is I do want to say this about our podcast. Yes, for the last however many weeks, we have been going through a lot of Christian and Jesus and Bible related content, but this is not just a Christian podcast. We are Christians, but we're not just going to talk about Christian things like the Bible, because I want to be able to have talks with you guys as Christians, and especially as Christians who grew up in different generations, on different things, which is why we went over like what the Bible says about culture. That was kind of our toes being dipped into the Bible relating to a different type of thing. But I say all this to say today's topic is actually going to kind of be focused on this guy right here. Both of us have been talking for a long time on many different topics, but now we've kind of gotten to a point where we're both going to share certain things about this one topic, which I'll say in a second. But I'm kind of letting you take over in a sense with your answers while I provide the questions. So the topic today is really about the computer age, if that makes sense, or maybe you want to call it the information age, information technology age. And as I mentioned with our generations, I was born as a Gen Zer, and I know he probably hates when I say this, but he was born the last year of baby boomer. I don't know if you would consider yourself a baby boomer, but the internet says otherwise.
It says I'm a baby boomer. I say I'm a baby boomer about as much as I'm a Christian, and I say that to mean I don't know and I don't care. I'm a human being, and I was born at some point in history. Call me what you want. I'm a Jesus follower. If that's Christian for you, call me a Christian. If that's some whack Jesus freak, call me a whack Jesus freak. I don't care.
Yeah, so he was born in the baby boomer age. I'm a Gen Zer, and so because of that long gap, of course, because I'm his child,
I'm smarter.
He's smarter and has a college degree that I'm still working on. Except, really, off topic, is there really a difference between associates and bachelor? I don't know.
A lot more money.
Probably. Well, at least for me, not for him, for me. And probably where you grew up too. But anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's just the difference between generations of the information age. And so I wanted to start, and again, let me say this as well. This is an interactive podcast. So whether you have questions for him, or whether you have questions for me, or whether you have questions for both of us, put your questions in the chat. We are reading both the YouTube and Twitch chat, and would love to be able to have a conversation not only with ourselves for you guys to enjoy, but also with you so that you can continue to enjoy our conversation. So really, just to get us started with the first question that I have, I wanted to ask you, and I'll ask it to myself as well, how would you describe in the context for you in your workplace and what you've been doing the last 30 something years, how would you describe technology in your context?
Technology in my context. Okay, so two different answers really, I guess. There's my context at how I use technology at work, and then there's my customers' context and how they use the technologies that companies I've worked for sells. So for me, the technologies and how I work and operate is really very similar to this. I, for the better part of the last decade, have worked from home in a remote environment, have managed resources across the globe, but it's largely been through Teams meetings, Zoom meetings, Google Meets meetings, that kind of thing. Microsoft Office products, predominantly Google products for those who use those products instead of the Microsoft Office suite. And then PowerPoint slides, et cetera, communicating, and then technology for bank transactions and bookkeeping and all the things that have really were once for businesses mainly are now in everyday life, right? I think most people typically transact using debit cards and credit cards or their app, their iPhones, and they pay with things like that. So that's how I use technology. Companies I've worked for have had software products. Back in the day, I worked for one of the early internet service providers. So in the area where I grew up, if you in the early 90s wanted to be on the internet, you would have subscribed to the internet through the company I worked for. And so I was a project manager at that point. And so we provided internet service, much like you would get through any company today that gets your internet, so whether it's AT&T or Spectrum or any of the big names. But so customers would have used technology that way back then. Customers would use our software. So typical customers for me have been either manufacturing companies using real-time location systems. So those are, I'll get into that in just a minute, or IoT, Internet of Things, you'll hear that term. Products that have been mapping related geographic information systems products for utility companies, communications companies like fiber providers, telephone companies, cable operators, etc. And really, so the customer's use of the products that we've sold has really been in the context of the location of things and then showing those things on the map. So if you track an individual or a thing like a car in a manufacturing plant, you can follow that car through the manufacturing process and know at any point where it is in the process, what work should be getting done on it, what person's closest to it, what tool they have in their hand, and can monitor that. Another example is in a hospital setting, you can know where a doctor is, what piece of equipment that they have, like a crash cart for a defibrillator or whatever, and the patient's room that they're in, so that you might be able to detect if you've got a doctor with a crash cart to do a heart defibrillation that's in a room that's a cancer patient. And you can kind of alert folks to, well, something might be wrong here. So that's kind of some of the technologies that I've been involved with the companies I've worked for, or the things I've done in across throughout my career. There's been lots of other things, but those are the ones that stand out to me.
And me me as a 21-year-old, not having 30 years of experience, I guess for me, the technology that I've dealt with is really just in the gaming world. I've done streaming, I've done VR. It's really all the gaming world is where my technology came from. And I'm guessing even like I have grown up in the time, or I've grown up in the time and really in the right place where a lot of my schooling involved going to school, but mainly going to school just to get on a computer and do your schoolwork. And so I was stuck on a computer anyway while being inside of a school building, and really COVID just enhanced that. It almost a lot of people, when I went through COVID, a lot of my friends would have told me, I hated going through COVID because we couldn't go to school, and we had to do online school, and online school is just horrible, and I don't want to be on a Zoom meeting. And I'm just over there going, what's so bad about that? Like, it's amazing. I get to stay home. I get to be on a computer. I get to have Zoom meetings with my teachers. Like, what's so bad about that? So I was the weird kid when COVID came around, of me going, yeah, I kind of love being at home doing school. Now, would I be fine going back to school? Sure. I'm not trying to protest to my parents that I want to be homeschooled. but that was really technology for me, is video games, as well as really just going through school, being on a computer, a lot of times. And that's also kind of why I got started with streaming and content creation and online ministry in a sense, is just because I had this idea as a young kid of how could we collide um, spreading the gospel on this new gigantic atmosphere of online ministry and people playing video games. And one of the things that me and my dad have agreed with going through my company, If Ministries, is there are a lot of people out there that are lost, especially in my generation. And I believe we have this on the If Ministries website. The best place that you can find a lot of them is online. So why not, I guess, mess with online to be able to gain people for the gospel? And that's why I started doing my thing at 9 years old and have been doing it ever since with video games and streaming and stuff like that. So that's a little bit about how we can describe it in our own context. Of course, I most of my context has just been passion and hobby, while yours has been getting paid
Yeah.
to do it full time.
Well, I mean, I think obviously passion and hobby is predominant because you are not yet in a position where you need to work, right? Or that you've been pushed to work. And so while I've encouraged you and your older brother to get a job when you want to, and certainly participate in the household chores, and you're part of the family, you own responsibility. I've also always said enjoy your childhood, because you will have 40 years of work life when you get there. So when you graduate, you'll have every opportunity. The one thing I would like to throw into the conversation about technology is that it's easy in today's day and age to just lump some technology and computers and sort of together in kind of a mutually not exclusive but synonymous terms. And if you think about technology, though, is any change in a way that improves things can be considered like a technological advancement. So think about what it used to be, that you used to create angles and draw circles with something called a protractor, right?
Or you pencil in the middle.
Right, yeah, or you had angles and you had you drew things out, and then you had a ruler, and then you had the yardstick, and then there's these continual evolutions of things. And then it used to be you wrote on paper, and then along came some
Typewriter.
Well, even before paper, you had what was called the abaca, the thing with the beads on it that you did your counting, right?
Oh yeah, the calculator
right
stuff.
And then you had these things that had buttons on them that you pulled a lever that helped do calculations on it. And then you came out with a calculator, right, that took batteries, and then solar powered calculators. And those are all continual evolutions of old technology, but still we use the technology on a computer today. It's just we generally will say to my phone, like, hey, device, what's the sum of, or what's the square root of, and right? And we don't use it, we still use a calculator, but we talk to it instead of asking it, right? And so we joked about Paul's use of technology, right? Paul wrote letters to communicate to his social audience, right? And he would send those via people, and he would say to the Thessalonican church, to the people in Thessalonica, hey, after you read this letter, send it over to the people in Ephesus and have them read it too. I've told them to send their letter to you. And then we've had carrier pigeons, right? And you put a message on, you send a carrier pigeon. So there's just, when you think about technology, think about that, right? Think of how things have drastically changed over the millennium, and who knows what's next, right? You would have never thought, when you were putting pen to paper, anything about this computer age. So just give yourself the freedom to say, like, whatever we have today, enjoy it for what it's worth, but it'll probably change in 5 years or 10. So I think that the way we use technology will continue to change, from even not even typing on the keyboards now to talking to it.
Yeah, holograms are next.
Holograms, AI, right? We hear AI all the time, and it's just really quite frankly, in its infancy. It's still it's still being played with and tested. We'll see what becomes of it.
Do you think, I mean, this is probably getting into I don't know, don't care territory, but it made me think when you were using, I mean, I can understand your point of technological advancements being a lot of different things, but is there a difference between saying, something is a technological advancement of something else? Is that different or the same to saying this is an evolution of something else?
I think there is, but I think the way we use terms is so subjective, and people, quite frankly, you hear me joke about the marketing people of the world all the time, like how they spin terms to say, hey, this is a technological advancement, and I'm like, no, that's just that's just a new way of using the typewriter or something like that, right? It's not really technology. Like my wife has a new heart valve, right? And it's a technological advance. No, it's just a mechanical valve. It lets blood through one direction, it closes, and it's not even all that sophisticated, quite frankly. But she'd be dead without it, right? And so what we call technology, I guess is my point, is what we call technology can be very subjective in its nature. So there's evolving technology, and then there's things new, but I don't know, this isn't a Bible thing, but I can't talk without talking about the Bible and talking about the Lord. But if you read Ecclesiastes, right, it'll say there's nothing new under the sun, right? What has been has already, what is has already been, and what will be has already been.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it doesn't even matter what we have today. It's just nothing new under the sun, is what the writer, the preacher, it's called, but the collector, I think it's the better word for it.
And I'm sure there's probably many people out there who, like, someone would say, I hate technology. God's never going to use technology. Why is technology here? And I would be someone to be like, well, if God doesn't want technology, then he can just smite it out of existence right now. Like,
well, he could, but that's also to say, well, if God doesn't want rape, murder, incest, he would just get rid of it. So clearly he just wants it, right? Which is nonsense, right? What God allows is he allows a human race that have chosen to be their own God to reap the consequences of their own choices. So it's not that God wants any of this stuff for us, but God wants us to see in our own timing our utter dependency and need for him. And if that's to leave us to our own devices for a period of time, then lovingly he will do that. Lovingly he is doing that.
So for this next question, I've kind of already answered it myself. I don't know about him, but basically the next question I wanted to ask is how you got introduced to technology. And of course, for me, computers are everywhere, video games are everywhere, TVs are everywhere. Yeah. I was born in a generation where how I was introduced to technology was being brought home, or even being in the hospital, to be honest.
Yeah, in the hospital, you're right. I don't remember being in the hospital, but I'm sure they had technology in the hospital when I was there. Again, whatever our definition of technology. The ballpoint pen, you would say, was a technological advancement, right? Like before they had that. So, So I was going to answer that the way I was introduced to technology was very similar to the way you were introduced. I remember playing video games, very archaic and old video games. I remember a little electronic device that was a trivia, and you had to put manual cards in it, and it knew what card was in it, but then it would read each card held but they were literally paper cards, like card stock things that you put in there. But the truth is I believe the way what introduced me to technology, I'm pretty darn sure, were commercials on children's cartoon
ads
on children's cartoon television shows, right? Nobody knew anything about technology until Christmas time was rolling around, and they started blasting you with commercials of stuff that you just had to have that, right? And so whether it was a wind-up Evel Knievel motorcycle, that again wasn't electronic technology, but certainly was pretty cool, or whether it was that triangle-shaped video game, we ought to go find that.
I was going to say, maybe this is the one you were talking to me about.
The triangle-shaped video game, I forget what it was called, but that the cartridges were shaped like a triangle. The game console itself was a triangle, and on one side it had Pong, so it had the little dials for Pong, and then you rotated. The other side had a gun and a pistol, right, holster, and the other side had the steering wheel and a stick shift. That was I lived on that game for a couple years before Atari or something else came out afterwards.
We went from having plastic with multiple games to just multiple games instead of a cartridge.
But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately technology was through the commercialization of games for children and bring us in that world. But you could argue that going from rotary dial telephone to a wall phone that had push buttons, right, to being a cordless wall phone, but you had to be within proximity of the base. Like all that were technological advancements.
As the phone numbers were getting bigger and bigger.
And then ultimately my true foyer into technology, computers, really came about during my late senior year of high school. When at 17 years old, I was absolutely clueless what I wanted. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do in the world at 17 years old. And I told you and I told your brother the same thing. Look, at 17 years old, there were only two things that I knew for sure, with any amount of confidence. One was, you know, disclaimer, parental guidance on this one. One is I hated school. I didn't want any more of it. I did not like school. Didn't like learning, didn't like studying, didn't like reading. I just didn't like school. I didn't like peer pressure. I didn't like the whole, stress of, dating or whatever it is. I mean, it's my introverted side was probably running havoc. But I didn't like school. I didn't want any more of it, was number one. And number two was I knew that if I was going to get a decent job in the world, I needed to go to college. And so I decided I would go to a community college nearby. I could stay at home. I could drive. I was at that point dating a girl, and so I didn't really want to go away, anyway. And so one of my best friends was going to college that I was going to go to, and so I asked him what he was going to do, and he said, basically computers. And I thought, okay, well, I'll do computers too, because then I'll at least be in class with my friend. And that's how I say I happened upon technology, but that was just one of the many places that I can look back in my life and I can see God was truly orchestrating in my utter ignorance of anything in life. God was lining things up. He was using my own humanity, my own ignorance. He was using my own desires to not go to a real proper school and to be in class with a friend, and nothing wrong with all. But God was using all those things to put me in this place that really set me up for a career in technology. That I know, because I had never seen a computer before. I took another thing God did, used my surface pointless humanity to, in my junior year of high school, say I needed to take some elective classes, and I decided I would take typing, because there'd be a lot of girls in that class. And then I actually got an A in typing. I thought, well, I'll take typing again. There'll be a lot of girls in that class. And so I took 2 years of typing, which again, not that God was happy with why I did it, but God used my humanity to give me solid typing skills so that in computers in college, I wasn't learning how to type like a lot of my college friends were, because they had taken typing. So they had to learn how to type. Where I was already proficient at typing. So that's anyway, long-winded way. Welcome to Ramblings with Rodney. But that's a long-winded way of answering that question.
So in a sense, to answer the next question I was going to ask, you didn't truly love computer science. You loved the girls in your class.
No, I didn't, because I didn't love computer science because I didn't know what computer science was. Again, when I took and
your friend, I guess.
First of all, I'd say I have a degree in the computer science field, because I don't even know that computer science was a curriculum at the time. My degree is actually in electronic data processing. And when our computers were big honking computers that took up a full room, and we used punch cards. So when we wrote a program in COBOL, we would write it out in the COBOL language, and it would get produced in a stack of punch cards, where you can see my screen, but a stack of cards this big. And they would be like, I don't know if you have anything in here, but I would say, they would be probably this wide, and then maybe this high. Maybe not quite this wide, but that's what a card would look like, and they would have holes in them that the computer would shine light through and read. And so you would
Like Braille for computers.
Braille for computer. You would put your programs on that computer, would read it, and then execute the program. Or if you were doing that was your database, so that would have all your name, address, customer information on it. The card would represent all that.
Before Access.
Yeah, before remote computers. But then personal computers were really around by 1982, but they were still fairly young, and so I ended up getting a Apple Trash 80, we would call them TRS 80. We call it trash. It didn't even have a hard drive. So it had an external cartridge that looked like if you've ever seen a
Floppy disk?
no, a cassette player, old cassette player that's yay big, and it looked like that, and you put cassettes in it, and they were your magnetic tape readers, and that was its quote hard drive. It didn't have a hard drive, but anyway, so I started to love computers certainly by the time we got to my probably my third semester when laying on the floor and realizing I could get a computer to do what I wanted it to do with if then else types of statements and walk it through a very logical set of instructions and commands, because that's the way I think. I'm very logical in my approach. So programming just made sense to me. Whereas the English language and poems and story they just didn't make sense to me. Or it didn't make sense to me why Charles Dickens took this long to tell the Christmas Carol, right? When you could have told the same story in about 3 set paragraphs, right? So the literature just didn't work for me. Computer was logical; it made sense to me.
I feel that way with Chimney Sweep. I read a poem. This is translation for you somehow, some way. There's a poem called The Chimney Sweeper. There's 2 different versions of the same story, and it's probably about this long. It's like, number 1, why 2? Number 2, why is it that long? Anywho, Chimney Sweeper. Look that up if you're interested.
Hey, Christo, welcome, by the way. We
Yeah.
see your message, so thank you. And assuming you're still awake, but if not, don't wake back up if you heard your name. Go to sleep, go to sleep.
So going back to your college days, which you did mention a year for the first time. I think you said 1989 or whatever, 1980 something.
Something 80, yeah.
You mentioned a year.
Sorry.
Now you guys know how old he is.
When I'm not supposed to put that out on the internet.
Yeah, now you guys know how old he is. But going back to your college life, whether it be something you learned, something you read, or maybe something one of your professors said, and maybe this is all blocked out of your mind, what is something that you remember from college that you have kept since?
Oh wow. There's not a lot that I could share, I guess.
All the computer language?
Yeah, I don't know. That I've kept since. No.
Even if it's like a funny story.
Well, flow charting. I mean, because again, the flow chart was just a way of putting on, a picture form, the flow of how things should go. And I just logically, it makes sense to me. So I've certainly kept that. And even if I don't use the correct official symbols of the flow charts, but that certainly as a business analyst, I've continued to use. I will say that a couple professors' statements have stuck with me, like really not earth-shattering, but they've just stuck with me. Mm-hmm. So one was the professor of the flowcharting course said at the beginning of the semester that if we missed 3 classes during the semester, that we would fail the course.
3? We get 2.
Well, not because he had a hard rule that said you'll just be lost. You won't be able to take the course. Well. Like so many teachers say that, so I just kind of like in my youthful arrogance blew him off like, yeah, whatever. Well, I promptly got chicken pox and missed literally the next 3 classes in a row. And when I went back to the class the next time, he could have been speaking in French or German. Like I had no idea what he was talking about. And I went up to him after the class and I told him, I said, first of all, I just need to apologize because when you made that statement, I didn't think anything about it, but I need help. Like I'm completely lost. Mm-hmm. He offered to spend, I think, an hour with me or 2. And after one one-on-one session with him, I felt like I was further ahead in class than anyone else was. He was that good at getting me up to speed, and I wish I would have remembered his name, because I'd give him a call out right now for it. But just absolutely super and good. But so I think that was kind of number one, and I think number two is one of our professors said, and I wish that all colleges would do this, is that the professor said that every test would be an open book test. That in the business world, it wasn't his job to teach us how to memorize and remember things for the rest of our lives. It was his job to teach him how to learn things on our own. Because when you get in a work world, especially if you're a computer programmer, you don't memorize every computer language. You just keep the syntax book up on the top of your desk. And when you need to do something, you reach up and you grab the book. You find out what the syntax of the if then else statement is, and for whatever language it is. Well, of course, now you don't have the book. You go to the internet. But the point is you should memorizing things isn't necessary. You just need to know how to go find the answer. And so for me, that was really those two things really stood out in terms of things that any of the professors said.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely love as I said, we had, I think it's 2 classes missed and you failed a class, but then the professors that say just look it up. Love those guys.
Yeah.
But let's say a little hello to Zen or Zen Dot. Let us know what we should call you. Yes, this is my father, and the topic, we're just going over like the differences between technology from then to now, from when he grew up to when I grew up. So that's kind of the topic, and it's really a conversation that we're having, but we would love to have you ask questions, make some comments to be able to chime in. Oh, Emmanuel! Happy to have you in the stream.
Yeah.
And same goes for you. Same goes for you. Ask questions, say comments, whatever you want, but yeah, that's the topic, is just technology from when he grew up to when I grew up. So hope that helped. So let's see. I'm looking through my notes over here. So this next one, I almost had like a assumption of what your answer would be on this. But every time I think about technology in maybe you could say the late 90s for when I think about technology, at least with the videos that I've seen, one of the things that always comes to my head is the Y2K bug. That is something that for some reason always comes to mind, is Y2K bug, Y2K, whatever it would be called.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask, what was your experience with the Y2K bug?
At the end of the day,
and you can explain what it is if you want to.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Y2K stands for the year 2000. And so other than Prince having a party like it's 1999 and the world's going to end theme going on everywhere, we all prepared for the worst, right? The doomsayers were that the world was going to the world wasn't going to come to an end in 2000, but all the computers were going to crash. So the reason is, the background of this is, in the 70s and the 80s, the cost of computer equipment was really expensive. The cost of a hard drive was expensive. So what you paid per kilobyte was expensive. And so all the programmers and all the database people did everything they could to reduce the data as much as they could. So if you had to store an address, you only stored it one time, and you referenced it from all sorts of different places. And we called that normalization. You would normalize the database so that you only stored one piece of information one time, and then you would share it amongst other databases and tables and programs and things like that, because hard drives cost so much. Well, why is that important? Was important because one of the things that programmers and database administrators did to save hard disk space was they didn't store a year as a 4-digit year. They stored it as a 2-digit year.
Yeah, 99.
99 was 1999. 77 was 1977. 00 was 1900. Well, somebody realized, in the 90s, that when we get to the year 2000, every computer is going to think that's 1900, and all the math is going to fall apart when you go to try to calculate your health insurance benefits and your retirement age, because it's no longer 2001 minus I was born in 1970. It's 1901 minus I was born in 1970. Wait a minute, you're negative 68 years old. It's we're like, we got a problem on our hands. Something, all the programs that have been built to use 2-digit years had to be fixed. So after a period of outright panic and naysayers and doomsayers, long story short, for probably a period of certainly from 96, 90, mid 90, no, 97, yeah, 97 to 2000 for pretty much 3 full years. A large part of the consulting business and work that I did revolved around these Y2K projects, banks, businesses, credit unions, all sorts of companies, utility companies, hiring programmers and consultants to come in and add the 2 digits to their databases, populate it with the 19s or the 18s or whatever the case may be, and fix the problem. Meanwhile, everybody was planning to, before the turn of the year from 1999 to 2000, fill up your bathtubs with water, make sure you have batteries in your house for your flashlights and everything, stored up candles, lots of canned goods. I mean, everybody was preparing for today what would be the equivalent of like a nuclear war, right? Only this wasn't like nuclear war could happen anytime. It's going to happen at midnight on December 31st, 1999. So take cash out of the bank, right? So that if you can't use your credit cards, because credit cards were around then, but if you can't use them because the bank systems no longer work, you need to have cash to buy food. Cash will be king if all the systems crash and go down. And so, yeah, so that was, at the end of the day, it was a whole lot to do about nothing, because midnight came, midnight went, everybody checked their account and then went to bed.
Yeah.
And
your computer said,
but it was it was a worrisome time, but there's been a lot of other worrisome times over history. But that's the Y2K situation. It was interesting to say the least.
And any of your family friends crazy about it, or?
No, I mean, I know that I was in the computer industry, and I didn't have any level of confidence going into midnight that there was going to be fairly confident that there was going to be fallout. Now, I didn't think that anything major. I didn't feel like the whole electric grid would go down. Like, we've had bigger problems with the grid going down just by use, right? That has nothing to do with Y2K. So, but yeah, I was optimistic things would be fine, but I was also, we filled the tubs up with water. I'll be honest with you, right? We had cash. In fact, I kept cash on hand for probably another year after that. A decent amount of cash that we had available in a couple different locations that should we need to go get it, we could. But I don't know, there wasn't really anyone in my circle that was like it didn't get the craziness that, say, mask wearing got with COVID. Like there wasn't this north and south sort of like crazy off the edge people on either direction saying, you're going to hell if you do it, you're going to hell if you don't, right? It was like, what are you going to do if I think that felt like it was more the case. What are you going to do if you can't get your money out of the bank the next day? And I'm like, I don't know. Same thing Adam did, right? Pack up my tent and move or something. God will take care of us.
Yeah. So I just realized that the notes that I have written are in chronological order. I usually do that. This time I tried not to. Didn't happen. But so my next question, which is kind of goes along with the last 3 questions that I have here, 3 or 4. My next question that I wanted to ask is, how was what we would call social media introduced to you? Because I'm sure probably back in your day when it started, it probably wasn't called social media. But I wanted to ask, how was that introduced to you? Whether it be, and it can be all 3, like a certain platform that you discovered or was told about, the term social media. How was it introduced to you?
It probably would have been for me. It probably would have been through when I worked for that company. It was an internet service provider in the early '90s. So the internet was really in its infancy then. So they would have been chat rooms, probably bulletin boards. So if I say bulletin board, it's not we have a bulletin
forum?
board like it was basically a forum, right? And so as a programmer, if you wanted to learn if you needed to write a code to do like employee payroll or something, overtime processing, uh, and you didn't have any code to start with, you didn't have the internet to go to. You learned of a bulletin board, and you actually would use a modem and dial in to the bulletin board, and a thing would come up on your screen, and you'd be saying option number 1, option A, choice, right, and then you download the file, but it was all over a phone connection, a dial-up telephone connection that you called up and called down. But I would say those were sort of early, if you will, social media types of ways, was having bulletin boards or forums, and the chat rooms were coming out, things like that. So again, just an electronic. They were really all just electronic versions of what you had already on paper, like in some sense. So a pen pal, for example, you just became electronic email, that sort of thing, or a social club being the fraternity that I belong to, right, and things like that, or non-electronic social media. Every Thursday we got together and played setback or poker or spades or some form of cards. My parents would get together and play rook or rummy or bridge is another game from that era, that a lot of people played. And so those were the kind of the pre-technology forms of social media. And so social media is always say it's always been around. And when I left Facebook, if you will, decade to go. I said, look, I still am very much a fan of social media. So if you want to be social with me, I'll be on my patio out by the ornamental fish pond. Come join me, right? Or call me up and I'll come join you. But let's be social, real social. Now, Emmanuel, just to recognize your post there, your comment about Orthodox and Catholic Church. Fluffy started this conversation saying that we've spent a lot of time doing biblical based topics. I'm sure we will get back to them, and I doubt that we'll ever have a week that we talk about something that doesn't involve scripture, with me bringing in God and my philosophy of life's view of everything is spiritual. But this particular one is meant to be non-biblical at all. It's just really about technology. So, but as far as Orthodox versus the Catholic Church, I don't have a lot of exposure to either one of those. Quite frankly, so it would be I'd have to go research, but even then I'd be coming back and giving you my opinion on very limited amount of any knowledge or research. So I would likely say my answer on that one is I don't know.
But he did not care.
I didn't say don't know, don't care. This one's I just don't know on that one. I tend to say when it comes to Catholicism and Protestantism and Judaism and Islam and all the other ones, it's like at the end of the day, I think all of them have an element of truth because God is entwined in everything. And if anybody's seeking truth, they're going to find God. Then it's just a matter of finding the truth within the particular realm. So I think all religions are good and all religions are bad, and all denominations are good and all denominations are bad. And at the end of the day, I don't even like to use the word Christian in describing myself because it means so many different things to different people. So I just tend to say I'm a follower of Yeshua or a follower of Jesus, and then go from there.
And you already got some of my viewers on that train with you. Actually, I have one of my viewers who actually told me they're a follower of Jesus. They don't identify with the denomination. I was like, hey, you're like my father. I don't mind. Go do it.
Well, it's not that to be honest, right? I am a member of a denomination. I think Jesus clearly taught that we need to, gather together with other believers and support one another. And that gets back to the social media thing, right? I think social is good. Every church is a social organization, right? It is just a Christian-based or religious-based social organization. But that's one of the things that's both good and bad about it is that regardless of religion, they all end up being a social club of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And we put the social club at a higher priority than the being that should be at the highest priority of the social club.
Yeah.
Right. And as we talked about actually this morning, a right social orientation of any church or any religious organization should be that the rules of the organization are not meant for the members. They're meant for the non-members. Every church should be more concerned about the people who aren't members of a church than the actual members of the church, because our goal as a church is to reach the lost people. But too many of the programs within churches are inward focused on what's in it for me and my congregation. And we should be sacrificing everything of ourselves for the person out there who doesn't yet know the truth. That's a hard nut to crack, but I believe it's the correct nut. So says this nut.
I was gonna say, who knows if it is the correct nut? He just thinks. Anywho, so going back to the social media thing, you talked about just all the different ways that you could define something as social media before social media. When the I guess to put it this way, in my version of social media, in the way that we define social media now, so that whole sphere, was that a surprise to you when those types of platforms started coming out?
I don't know that it surprised me, because again, I was an early adopter, if you will, because of the jobs I had, right? So I was working for a company that was an internet service provider in the early 90s. I think what surprised me was
how lonely everyone is.
No, it probably took me 20 years to realize the loneliness factor and how negative and abusive it was. I think what surprised me was how quickly the social media stuff caught on, and how willingly people became social online to total strangers.
Yeah.
In some sense, that's a good thing, right? It in some sense, it almost restored my faith in humanity, that not everybody's evil and out to get you, that people are basically trustworthy and caring. And I still believe that's the case, even though our view of trustworthy and caring is still heavily self-centered and selfishly motivated. But compared to the spiritual view of, I'm your servant, right? I serve you because Jesus, compels me to. So I think that's the piece that surprised me. I think maybe more than anything.
Mm-hmm. And then, so there's one last, I guess, question that I want to ask, and then this second question is kind of a your last comment thing. So I want to engage your last comment with a question.
Okay.
So this next thing kind of goes into, I feel like I'm getting bigger and bigger. We went from computer to social media to now I'm going to start getting into like everything that you guys watch on television type of stuff. I looked up a statistic because I started to think about how my family, for example, we do not necessarily, I guess, use cable television. We are one of the people that do not really use cable television, and it made me think about, what is the statistics of cable television, streaming service, stuff like that. And so I found on the website Fortune, what am I saying? Fortune, or whatever it is, the average American watches cable television 29% of the time. People watch YouTube 22% of the time, and then people watch streaming channels, and for this survey they used Netflix only. People watch streaming channels 7.6% of the time. So I'll say that again. Cable television 29% of the time, YouTube 22% of the time, and then basically Netflix 7.6% of the time. And I wrote a little comment beside these statistics saying while cable television is the highest percentage at 29%, what are your thoughts on YouTube being 22% and cable television not being even at 50%?
All unfounded comments. But my gut just to answer without having any real data around it.
Did I find the not know territory?
No, it's not that I don't know, because you're just asking for my opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess like on the cable television, the 29%. Yeah, it's tough, right? Because I want to say, well, that's some measure that seems high to me, quite frankly.
Hmm.
But if you take everybody, all the baby boomers, and those like my father and my father-in-law, who are whatever the generation before the baby boomers was, like they're still paying for cable because it's all they know, right? And it's not worth the learning curve to get rid of cable and bring in Netflix. And so I wonder if you were to get rid of, say, everybody, if you were to remove from these numbers everybody who's over, say, 75 years old, how much that number would drop. Because how much, say, take that 29% of cable TV watchers. Of that 29%, is 80% of it people over 75 years old? Because it's all going to plummet, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you start to see all these cable providers divesting into other ventures, because they know these numbers, right? They know what that 29% is made of. So I think that's one thing to look at. And so I would say, as a general aside to all this, there's a Bible study teacher that used to be a CIO. Chuck Missler's his name, for those who like name dropping, whatever. But if you want, I haven't looked up any of his material in a while, but I've done a lot of study based on his material. So I don't know him, but I have a high regard for the materials that he produces. But one of the quotes he says is like, you can interrogate the data and make it say whatever you want it to say. And so when you see statistics like this, just keep in mind that 29%, there's a lot to be said about that, and who knows what it is. Now, as far as the YouTube being at 22%, that is a generational difference between you and I. Like, I go to YouTube and I think to myself, like why are you wasting your time listening to this old man give his opinion?
Twitch can be a part of that too.
It's like, I understand why people would pay for this, and they do. And it goes back to social media and a desire that people want personal connection. And what's sad is, because when you go get personally vested in somebody physically, like, I can touch this guy, right? I go get personally vested in somebody in my church family, and what you find out is you get your feelings hurt, right? Or they stab you in the back or betray. It's because we're an evil brood of vipers, like Jesus called the Pharisees, and should call all of us too, right? We're all self-centered, and given enough time, we'll all offend everybody. And so we got to come in with it. But when people go to the YouTube, right, or the YouTube, you go to YouTube or any form of social media, and Twitch, somehow you feel like you can trust that person, and if you can't, oh well, just wipe my hands clean up, and there's a billion other people in the world I can be, quote, friends with. So I'm amazed at how much time people vest their lives into folks they'll never meet. But hey, it's another day and age, and we can still, it's not all negative. We can help one another in ways that we could never help one another before, because we didn't even know each other existed on the other side of the globe, right? So if I can now become vested in the life of somebody who lives in South Africa, then that's a good thing, right? But the danger is that I can also completely corrupt in bad ways the life of somebody on the other side of the globe, and so it's also a dangerous place. So, but it's no different. Paul could have written. While Paul wrote his letters to the churches, there could have been a bunch of naysayers In fact, there were. You can read it in the scriptures about people writing things about the disciples that weren't true, and they said as some people are saying about us. Scripture says. So anyway, I don't know if that even answered your question or not.
I will
both numbers surprised me a
Yeah.
little bit for different reasons, quite frankly.
And I will add to your comment about YouTube. Like for us, I was thinking about it the more you were talking, but I was paying attention to you talking. Like think about like TV, whether it be, well, I guess movies can't count. Like TV shows. Whenever you watch a TV show, the average TV show minus commercials is 30 minutes. But of course, plus commercials is however long more than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
When you watch a YouTube video, there are multiple factors that go into if a YouTube video has commercials or advertisements. First, you have to be monetized to have commercials. And then there's this rule where, I'm not going to probably quote this correctly, but I think it's like you can't have a commercial in your video unless it's more than 10 minutes, maybe? Something like that.
Yeah,
There's a large amount. Anyway, so that's what I think the difference is like you can watch a 30-minute video with one ad break and be completely fine. While on TV, you could watch a 30-minute episode and have 5 commercial breaks and sometimes be like, just, can we stop the commercials?
Yeah,
Please?
but I think for me, though, the thing is when you're watching TV, you're watching a program. You're either being educated or entertained. You're not just watching somebody play a game or so I don't know. That's the part that I don't get. Now, I also don't get my father. My father will sit and watch people argue back and forth on Fox News, right? Which to me is like watching YouTube. Like, I don't care what either one of you say, right? Especially if you're going to argue with each other in an unproductive manner. Just get on, tell me your opinion, then get off and move on to the next one. And so there's that respect. Now, I could also say, well, I grew up. It wasn't uncommon for me to go in the living room and turn on a baseball game. Now, I could argue with myself and say, okay, well, Rodney, you don't understand Isaac getting online and playing Roblox and people watching him play Roblox. Mm-hmm. But you'd sit for 2 hours, 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon and watch people play a baseball game. That was playing a game. And, I'm like, so, it's, again, a new generation, nothing new under the sun, the preacher would say. And it's just a different form of watching other people enjoy themselves, play a game. And, and I just gotta lighten up.
And it also, continuing go on to that, like when, well, I was gonna say when YouTube Shorts came to be, but YouTube Shorts wasn't the first thing. It was like Instagram Reels was the first thing. But Instagram Reels, stuff like that, a minute or shorter. Yeah. That also goes into like, and I'm sure you would possibly agree with this. Like, attention spans are getting smaller. Really, in my generation and lower, attention spans are getting smaller. So we've gotten to the point where, we can watch a 1-minute video, no chance of having any ads whatsoever, and we'd be fine just scrolling through 1-minute videos.
but see, the thing here, I wish people would hear this, because I think this is important. Is we spend so much time worrying about the mental state, and the attention span, right? Mm-hmm. And the cognitive ability of the attention span. To me, that's not what's important. To me, what's more important is what this does is all about my momentary instant pleasure.
Doom scrolling.
And total disregard for the person that's on the other side. Mm-hmm. I don't care. Even if I care, what I care about is, it made me laugh. Don't care. Made me laugh. Don't care. Oh, that's actually really cool. It's all self-serving. And it's not the attention span that we're losing that concerns me. It's the heart that I think we've lost that concerns me.
What's up, Arctic Wolf?
And so, we've got to get back to caring about people. And social media does not, quite frankly, leave much room for caring about people. Even if you have a momentary heartstring, that you see something on YouTube, right? Or something on even Instagram or something on LinkedIn even that tugs at your heart. you almost pat yourself on the back that I got emotional about it, and then you scroll it away and you move on to the next thing. It's just it's killing relationships. That's, I think, my biggest fear is social media is not social. It's antisocial. It's killing relationships, and we're using social media to avoid real social interaction, which is quite frankly dirty and messy and complicated. And people don't want that. They want momentary satisfaction. And it's a lie. It doesn't exist. If you want social, you got to be physically present with somebody. Doesn't mean you can't get benefit out of these things, but it's not the true benefit.
And that's something that I'm guilty of it, but something that scares me with if ministries in a sense is I'm okay. Here's why here's why I say I'm guilty. There has been multiple times as a Christian where I'd be doom scrolling, because I do doom scroll, and a lot of times I would have people that would. There's this whole thing where people would do the "stop right now, let me pray for you" type of thing, and I hate to admit it, but the moment I hear anything of somebody saying stop and they're running to the camera, or if I just hear someone on the beginning of the video say, "Let me pray for you,"
Yeah.
That's me. That's what I do.
Well, here's the thing: is even in the real world, right? Even in the social interaction I talked about, we do the same thing, right? I'm being Saturday morning men's group, and I can be physically at the table with somebody else, and I'll say, well, I'll be praying for that.
And you might not be.
You may or you may not, and I would dare say the majority of us don't pray.
Yep.
And I've had to catch myself, so I try to now put myself in an purposefully uncomfortable situation, saying, if you don't mind, can I pray for that now? And do it. And on the phone, I've done that. Business calls, I've done that. I've said, you know what? If it's okay with you, can we pray about that right now? Business call, fire me if you want. But this has eternal value. I can get another job.
And text prayers.
Text prayers. Yes, I've prayed on text messages. And somebody's like, just text the message. I've not yet had a person, I can't think of one time in the years I've done this, that's a person who has ever said to me, no, that's okay, I'm good. Everybody wants to be prayed for. But again, we kind of doom scroll, right? Even in the real world. So don't get me wrong. Physical social interaction isn't always perfected either.
All right. So for the last question, which again, I wanted to kind of turn this into your closing statement before we officially say goodbye. But thinking about all this stuff that we've talked about, thinking about your life growing up in the technological age, both growing up and working in, how do you think, speaking to majority, probably the Gen Z generation, how do you think we as a generation could do better in this technological world?
I have an answer for this. I'm going to pause, play some music or something. So we
think if it's correct.
So we don't have dead air, to see if there's maybe a more appropriate answer. So do you want to add something to that question before I answer it, or add something follow up?
If you want to know, the topic is basically just generational difference between growing up in technology.
Because I'm a little older than him.
Yeah, a little bit.
Some people have been saying that anyway. We talked about that earlier. Absolutely, a blessing and a curse, and in every way. But we even talked about, though, technology in the sense of Paul the apostle used the technology of, I don't know, pencil, papyrus, something. He sent letters to other churches. Well, that was good. But there were also folks that were imposters that were also writing letters and using the same form of technology to send false statements around about Paul. And so it's nothing new, Ecclesiastes says, right, under the sun, is people are people, and we will abuse the best of the gifts that God has given us. Look at medical science. There are wonderful things that can be done with medicines, and people get into drug abuse all the time. and get addicted to painkillers all the time. Can be a blessing from heaven, can be a curse from Satan, can be a curse from heaven for all that we know. But yes, it's what we do with these things that ultimately, make them good or bad. Now, as far as what your generation can do with or change in the use of technology, I think for me, the answer is similar to what we did with cable television. And we said, for our house, cable, when we look at the benefits of cable and the curses, the blessings and the curses, as you said, of cable, we said the curses outweigh the blessing. And that the amount of smut that is coming into our house by our own choice outweighs the amount of anything good coming into the house. So we cut the cord and we just stopped paying for the cable bill and said, we'll just live without it. Now, we've replaced it with just as much garbage over the last 20 years, in my opinion, with Netflix and YouTube and all these other things. But to answer the question, I think the one thing that you can change about the use of technologies is to stop using it. Not entirely, but to minimize your use of it. If you want to become more social physically in terms of social interaction with people, if you want to become more avid readers of books, if you want to become better at sports, even if it's just better exercise and just playing outside, walking more outside, getting more vitamin K or whatever the sunshine is, you've got to break the addiction. And I think it's an addiction. I think that I think there's folks going to hear me say this, to stop using the internet, stop using technology, and starting to have cold sweats, right? Starting to have anxiety, just because you're so addicted. Like, what would I do if I didn't get online and stream 3 days a week? I bet you wouldn't die, right? So just that's my suggestion is stop. Don't even have a plan. Don't say I'm gonna like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday I'm not gonna use technology. I mean, you can say Monday, Wednesday, Friday I'm not gonna use technology, but don't try to say Monday, Wednesday, Friday I'm not gonna use technology and I'm gonna do this instead, because that'll lead you back to technology. Because you won't know, because you've spent so much time on technology, you don't even know what your options are. You got to get away from technology to know what your options are. And so let me give you this sort of example and an analogy of sorts. Is about 30 years ago, I guess, I made a decision that, much like cable television, I was going to stop listening to radio, because even though I loved country music, the message was always mostly bad, more bad than good. So I decided that I wasn't going to listen to the radio in my car. And I spent a lot of time in my car because I was a commuter and I traveled around doing deliveries. So I was in the car a lot. And I made a personal decision that for 30 days, I either was going to listen to Christian music or I wasn't going to listen to anything at all on the radio. There were a lot of days that I didn't listen to anything on the radio. It was silence in the car. Because I didn't particularly like Christian music, right? I didn't know the words. The beats weren't all that good for me. But I opted for silence. And so in the same way, if you choose to walk away from technology for a day or a half a day or an hour, give yourself a good option. But another option is to just not, the silence. It's okay to not do anything. It's okay to sit in darkness or just go on a back porch swing or whatever. So that's my long-winded answer to what's one thing you change with respect to technology, and that is stop using it so much, because you'll leave all the blessings of non-technology on the table. You won't have any idea what they are and what you could be getting just by sitting down with somebody over a sweet tea or coffee or a cake or a donut or whatever, right? There you go. Enough said. All right. Did we answer the question?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I believe we did. I feel like there was something I was going to say, but I've lost it. Anywho, All right, well, that is the end of this podcast episode. If you have any last minute comments, questions, put them in the chat, and if we see them, we'll definitely comment or try to answer the question the best we can. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching this next episode of the podcast. Let me see if I can find my phone. Did I throw it over here? There it is. I was gonna tell you guys the next topic, unless we change it by then, which might have a high chance. Who knows?
Yes. Given our propensity to change dates, times, and topics.
Well, not just the next week part, but the topic part.
Stay tuned, and maybe next time on
Ramblings with Rodney. Also, if you guys have any topics, if you're not just answering questions on the podcast, we want you guys to come up with topics and send them for us to talk about. So if you have any topics, we would love to be able to do that. But the next topic that I have listed on my little list of podcast topics, which might be our favorite don't know, don't care topic, is the most recent He Gets Us Super Bowl ad. When I was watching the Super Bowl, I noticed an ad that popped up that involved feet washing, and I had a suspicion, and my suspicion was right. It's by a company called He Gets Us. You guys can look up all the details. That's the best trailer I'm going to give you, but that is the plan for next week or whenever we do the next episode of the podcast. And like always, we hope to have questions and stuff to say, but if you have any questions that you want us to answer as a new topic or answer during the topic, feel free to come to these live streams and ask those questions. I will say, for those of you that might be watching on YouTube, thank you for watching the stream or maybe the post live. I usually do not live stream these things on YouTube, but that is probably what we're going to be doing this summer. And then once I go back to school, I'm going to have to go back to just streaming on Twitch. So this is maybe not a one-time opportunity, but a one summer kind of opportunity for you guys to join us on YouTube. And we can't wait to maybe see some YouTube comments coming in during those live streams. Any last words?
No last words.
All right.
Except for those last words.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next podcast episode or the next live stream, which, for those of you who might be new, I stream every weekday except Wednesday and Sunday, because I actually stream on Saturday as well, at 6 p.m. Eastern. So Monday to Saturday minus Wednesday. See you guys during one of those days or the next podcast episode. Bye! And also, I forgot to say this too. I'm having a movie night in Discord in a few minutes, right when I end the stream. Join us in Discord. Love to have you at the movie night. I forgot about that. Bye!